Next time, dress them properly, sister said, loud enough for guests to hear. My daughter's hands shook. My husband looked at her once, said 6 words, and silence followed. Well, let's go. My name is Marissa Whitlock, and looking back, I should have known better than to trust the warmth in my brother's invitation. The drive from Ashford, Vermont to Lindenbrook, Connecticut, had taken us 4 hours. 4 hours of Callan humming along to classic rock while our daughter Ivy read in the back seat, her nose buried in a worn copy of and of Green Gables. 4 hours of our son Bennett asking every 30 minutes if we were there yet. His excitement about seeing Uncle Dorian bubbling over like soda left too long in the sun. Callan had dressed the way he always did. A soft chambray shirt from LL Bean, khakis that had seen better days but fit him perfectly, and brown leather loafers he'd had resoled twice because he claimed they were finally broken and right. His salt and pepper hair was slightly tousled from the drive, and he wore that easy smile of a man completely comfortable in his own skin. I'd chosen a simple cream silk blouse and navy slacks, paired with my grandmother's pearl earrings. Ivy wore a vintage Ralph Lauren dress I'd found at an estate sale, soft rose with delicate embroidery, the kind of quality that lasted decades. Bennett had on his favorite polo shirt and pressed khakis, looking like a miniature preppy catalog model, though he'd already managed to wrinkle the front by the time we pulled up the long driveway shortly after 7 in the evening. The mansion rose before us like something out of a film, white columns gleaming in the early evening light, windows ablaze with crystal chandeliers. The lawn manicured to golf course perfection. Luxury cars lined the circular drive, Mercedes, BMWs, and a pearl-white Bentley that probably cost more than most people's houses. Wow, Bennett breathed, pressing his face against the window. Uncle Dorian lives here. He rents here, I corrected gently, though my stomach was already tightening with unease. Callan said nothing, but I caught the slight narrowing of his eyes as he took in the scene, that observational look he got when he was writing, cataloging details. Or at least that's what everyone thought he was doing. I knew better. My husband was always watching, always calculating, though few people ever suspected. The quiet man who introduced himself as a freelance nature writer was anything more than exactly that. We parked between a Tesla and a Jaguar. Our Volvo wagon, reliable, safe, 8 years old, looked like the help's vehicle. The party spilled across the mansion's grand terrace and sprawling lawn. Women in designer dresses that probably cost what we spent on groceries in 6 months. Men in suits so sharp they could cut glass. The air smelled of expensive perfume, champagne, and that particular scent of wealth, that indefinable mix of privilege and exclusivity that makes the uninitiated feel like they're breathing different air. We made our way up the stone steps. Ivy's hand found mine, her palm slightly damp. She was 9 and perceptive enough to sense when she didn't quite fit in, though she'd never say so. You look beautiful, sweetheart, I whispered to her. She squeezed my hand in response. A coordinator with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach her eyes intercepted us at the entrance. Names, please. Marissa Whitlock. This is my husband, Callan Mercer, and our children. She scanned her list, her expression shifting almost imperceptibly. Not rude exactly, but cooler. Ah yes, the Vermont family. Right this way. I felt Callan's hand settle lightly on my lower back as we followed her through the crowd. We passed the VIP zone, a raised section of the terrace with the best view, the best lighting, intimate clusters of cocktail tables draped in ivory linen. That's where I spotted Dorian, my younger brother, holding court in a slate gray suit that probably cost around $4,200. He saw us. Eyes met. For a moment, I expected him to wave us over, to introduce us proudly to his fiancée's circle. We'd driven 4 hours. I'd brought a gift, a first edition book I'd tracked down for Celeste, something I truly thought she'd appreciate. Instead, Dorian's eyes flickered with something I'd never seen directed at me before. Embarrassment. He glanced at the guests around him, all perfectly coiffed, all radiating that polished new money confidence, then back at us in our LL Bean and vintage Ralph Lauren. He didn't move. The coordinator led us past the VIP section, past the main seating area with its strategic proximity to the bar and the dance floor, past even the secondary tables. We ended up at a round table tucked in the corner near the kitchen door, where servers rushed past with trays and the music was muffled by the wall. The lighting was dimmer here. The view was of the service entrance. This was the fringe. "Enjoy the party," the coordinator said, already turning away. Callan pulled out a chair for me. His movements unhurried. He helped Ivy into her seat. Then Bennett. When he finally sat down beside me, he was silent. But I saw his jaw tighten. Just barely. "Mom," Ivy asked quietly, "why are we sitting by the kitchen?" "It's fine, honey. We can see everything from here," I lied, my voice bright. But we both knew. The seating wasn't random. It was a statement. Across the terrace, Dorian laughed at something one of his guests said. Champagne flute raised high. He didn't look our way again. Callan leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming once, twice against the tablecloth. To anyone watching, he looked relaxed, mildly interested in the spectacle around us. But I knew that look. I'd been married to this man for 12 years. He was taking notes, and Callan Mercer's notes always came with consequences. The party hummed around us like an exclusive machine we weren't meant to understand. Waiters glided past our corner table with barely a glance, their trays angled toward the VIP section. Their attention flowed where the money was. Laughter floated from the center of the terrace where Dorian and his fiancée, Celeste, held court under strings of Edison bulbs that cast everything in a flattering golden glow. Our corner had fluorescent spillover from the kitchen. Bennett kicked his feet under the table, still excited despite our exile. "When do we get to eat? I'm starving." "Soon, buddy," Callan said, ruffling his hair. He'd maintained that easy demeanor since we sat down, but I noticed he'd positioned his chair at a slight angle, better to observe the entire party. "The writer's eye," people always said. If only they knew. Movement caught my attention. Celeste was gliding toward us, her champagne-colored dress catching the light like spun sugar. She was beautiful in that calculated way. Every hair in place, makeup applied with surgical precision, jewelry that announced its price without needing words. At 28, she'd perfected the art of looking expensive. She stopped at our table, her smile fixed in place like a crown. "Marissa," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone of false warmth I'd heard before, usually right before someone delivered an insult wrapped in concern. "I'm so glad you could make it all the way from Vermont. It must have been quite the journey." 4 hours, I said evenly. "Not bad at all." "Well, you're braver than I am," she laughed lightly. "I couldn't imagine living so far from civilization. But I suppose that's the artistic lifestyle, isn't it?" She tilted her head. "Dorian told me you work for a non-profit. That must be very fulfilling." The way she said fulfilling made it sound like a consolation prize. Callan's hand found mine under the table, his thumb brushing my knuckles. A silent reminder. Her talk. "It is," I said simply. Celeste's gaze swept over our children, lingering on Ivy's dress. "And this must be your daughter. What a sweet vintage dress. Very quaint." Ivy's smile faltered. At 9, she couldn't quite parse the insult buried in the compliment, but she felt its edge. "It's Ralph Lauren," I said, my voice measured. "From the early 90s. Better quality than most things made today." "Oh, absolutely. Vintage can be charming," Celeste replied, her smile sharpening. "It's just that people here tend to prefer current collections, straight from the runway. But there's something to be said for making do with what you have. Very resourceful. Making do. As if we were one step from necessity instead of choice." A waiter appeared in the VIP section with a tray of canapés. Celeste excused herself with a graceful wave and returned moments later, shepherding a small group of guests in our direction like a safari guide pointing out exotic specimens. "Everyone," she said brightly, gesturing with her champagne flute. "This is Marissa, Dorian's sister. She lives secluded in Vermont to find artistic inspiration and works for a non-profit." A life that's very chill. But surely a bit removed from our fast-paced world, isn't it? The guests smiled politely, their eyes sliding over us with practiced disinterest. I could see the narrative forming. The sister who couldn't hack it. The one who fled to the countryside to play at being rustic. The cautionary tale. Actually, Callan said mildly, speaking for the first time since Celeste arrived, Marissa manages complex projects with multiple stakeholders and seven-figure budgets. The non-profit sector just places less emphasis on profit margins. His tone was pleasant, conversational even, but there was steel underneath. The kind most people missed because Callan had perfected the art of seeming harmless. Celeste's smile didn't waver. Of course, non-profits are so important. Though I imagine the salary must be quite modest compared to the private sector. But that's the sacrifice one makes for passion, right? She moved on before I could respond, her entourage trailing behind her like ducklings. Bennett tugged on my sleeve. "Mom, I'm really hungry. Can I get one of those things they're carrying around?" The buffet table had been set up near the VIP zone, a stunning display under warming lights. Bennett was already sliding out of his chair when Celeste materialized again, as if summoned by his interest. "Oh, Bennett," she said, crouching to his level, her dress pooling around her like liquid gold. "I'm not sure those appetizers are quite right for you, sweetheart." "Why not?" Bennett asked, genuinely confused. "Well, foie gras and caviar are very acquired tastes. I'm afraid without proper palate training, they can be hard to swallow." She tilted her head sympathetically. "Tell you what, I'll have the kitchen make something friendlier for you. Spaghetti. Fried chicken. I'm sure that's more what you're used to at home." The implication hung in the air like smoke. I stood, placing my hand on Bennett's shoulder. "No need, Celeste. The children will sit here and eat with their parents." She blinked. "I was only trying to help." "We don't need help," I said quietly. "But thank you." Celeste straightened, her expression cooling several degrees. She glanced at Callan, perhaps expecting him to contradict me. He didn't. He simply smiled. Pleasant, forgettable, unreadable. "Suit yourself," she said finally, sweeping away and leaving behind a cloud of expensive perfume and unspoken judgment. The table fell silent. Ivy picked at her napkin. Bennett's excitement dimmed. Across the terrace, Dorian remained absorbed in his VIP bubble, laughing and toasting, completely unaware, or willfully ignorant, of how his fiancée was treating his family. Callan leaned toward Bennett. "Hey, buddy. Want to know a secret?" Bennett nodded. "The best food at parties is always whatever you enjoy most. Doesn't matter if it's caviar or chicken fingers. If it makes you happy, it's the best." He winked. "And between you and me, I'd take a good burger over fish eggs any day." Bennett giggled, some of his sparkle returning. But I saw the way Callan's gaze tracked Celeste across the terrace. The way his jaw set just slightly tighter. Someone had insulted his children. And Celeste had no idea what she'd just set in motion. The party had reached its crescendo by 10 minutes to 8, but at our table, I was halfway through explaining to Bennett why he couldn't have a third canopy when I noticed Ivy's empty chair. My daughter had excused herself to the restroom 10 minutes ago. The knot in my stomach tightened. I stood, scanning the crowd for her blonde head, for her vintage Ralph Lauren cardigan, the one I'd found at an estate sale, pristine condition, better quality than anything in Celeste's closet. Then I saw her. Ivy was walking back toward our dark corner. But something was wrong. Her shoulders were hunched forward. Her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. Even from across the terrace, I could see the redness around her eyes, the way she blinked too fast. She slid into her chair without looking at me. "Ivy," I whispered, leaning closer, keeping my voice low. "Honey, what happened?" She shook her head, her jaw clenched tight. That's when I knew it was bad. Ivy didn't cry easily. She was too much like me, holding everything in until it cracked. "Sweetheart, talk to me." Her voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper. "Can we just go home?" My heart broke. What happened? Some kids, she swallowed hard. There were these girls by the bathroom. They were maybe 12 or 13. She hesitated, then continued. They pointed at my shoes. I looked down at her feet. The suede flats, soft taupe, classic silhouette, worn but carefully maintained. I'd bought them at a vintage boutique in Vermont because they were real quality. The kind that lasted. They said, Ivy's voice cracked. They said I was wearing poor people's shoes. They asked if we got them from a donation bin because they looked so old. The rage that flooded through me was white-hot and instantaneous. My 9-year-old daughter. My sensitive, brilliant girl who read 3 grades above her level and volunteered at the animal shelter every weekend. Reduced to tears over shoes. I reached for her hand. That's when I heard the click of heels on marble. Celeste appeared at our table like a shark sensing blood. Oh dear, she said, her voice dripping with false concern, pitched just loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. Is everything all right? Several guests turned to look, champagne flutes pausing mid-sip. We're fine, I said flatly. Are you sure? Because Ivy looks upset. Celeste tilted her head sympathetically. Did something happen? I opened my mouth, but Ivy spoke first. Some girls made fun of my shoes. Celeste's eyes flicked down to Ivy's suede flats. And I saw it. That microsecond of satisfaction. Then she arranged her face into concern. Oh, sweetheart, she said, crouching to Ivy's level in a performance of compassion. You know, children here are raised differently. Their parents are business leaders. Philanthropists. These kids are being groomed for Yale, for Harvard. They have very refined standards. My fingers curled into fists beneath the table. Celeste continued, her voice taking on a teacherly tone. Honestly, Marissa, I've been worried about this. The children, they're not used to being in environments like this. Living so isolated up in Vermont without regular exposure to proper social settings. She sighed, shaking her head. It causes culture shock. They don't understand the expectations. The words hung in the air like poison. She wasn't defending Ivy. She was defending the bullies. Maybe next time, Celeste said, standing and smoothing her dress. You could prepare them better. Make sure their clothing is more appropriate for the occasion. It would save everyone the awkwardness. The crowd was watching now. I could feel their eyes on us. On my children. Judging. Celeste's implication was crystal clear. This is your fault. You brought your backwoods children where they don't belong. And now everyone is uncomfortable. I was shaking. I wanted to scream. To drag her outside. To expose her. But Reed, no, Dorian was here somewhere in this crowd. My brother. My only sibling. And if I made a scene at his engagement party, I'd be painted as the villain. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Celeste's smile widened. Victorious. She thought she'd won. Then Callan stood. The change in him was immediate and terrifying. Gone was the gentle, soft-spoken man who'd spent the evening quietly observing. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. He stood to his full height, moving with controlled precision that made people instinctively step back. He didn't say a word. He simply stood there. One hand adjusted the button of his jacket, tailored, understated, perfectly fitted, and the silence spread outward like ripples in water. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses stopped clinking. Callan didn't look at Celeste. He looked at me. His eyes were calm, cold, focused. There was a question in them. One we'd asked each other 1,000 times in our 17 years together. Have you had enough? I thought about Ivy's red eyes. About Bennett being told he wasn't cultured enough to eat. About being shoved into a dark corner while Celeste paraded in a dress worth more than our monthly grocery bill. About driving 4 hours to celebrate my brother, who hadn't checked on us once. He nodded. The decision was made. Celeste's smile faltered as she sensed something had shifted. She took a small step back, suddenly uncertain. Callan's expression didn't change. He reached down, helping Ivy out of her chair with infinite gentleness. Then Bennett. "We're leaving," I said, my voice steady. In that moment, with my husband's silent strength at my back and my children's hands in mine, I chose their dignity over my brother's party. Chose us,